Welcome, everyone. Hope you all had a great Labor Day weekend. I want to begin by thanking, again, as we usually do, our host here at the Hampshire House, Tom Kershaw, for once again graciously opening up this magnificent and beautiful venue to the New England Council. It's hard to believe that fall is already here, but we have a great calendar of events in store for you in the coming weeks. So let me just go through a couple for you. Tomorrow, we'll be in Hartford, Connecticut, with an event with Congressman John Larson, 1st Congressional District in Connecticut. On Monday, the 18th, we have the Blue Economy at the New England Aquarium. On September 26th, we are one of the co-sponsors of the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement at the EMK Institute, where the guest speakers will be former Congressman Joe Kennedy, Congressman Richie Neal, and former Majority Leader George Mitchell. And we also have the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, speaking to the New England Council on September 27th. And then October 6th, we have Congresswoman Lori Trahan speaking to the New England Council. October 10th, we have Congressman Jake Auchincloss speaking to the New England Council. And on October 17th, we have Representative Catherine Clark speaking to the New England Council. And also on October 23rd, we have Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island speaking to the New England Council. And as you know, we have our annual celebration dinner in October, and that's October 26th. And as of yesterday afternoon, we now have 155 tables sold, and we still, Larry Zabar says we have another 7 weeks to go. We have a couple of tables left. Anyone interested in more information on this, contact Larry. So obviously it's going to be very, very, very busy. And to all of you, I just say thank you. And our dinner, we have 4 extraordinary New Englanders a year. And that is one of the reasons why we have 155 tables already sold. One of the New Englander of the Year is here. Pam Reese is here, and we want to congratulate her. But today we are delighted to welcome Dr. Susan Collins, the CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, for her first New England Council event. I might add that once she became the head, I think I was one of the first individuals to pursue the president to speak to the New England Council, and she finally has agreed. So the old adage, good waiters get good tips. So we are very grateful that she has acquiesced to speak today. She was named the bank's 14th leader, February 22, took office just over a year ago, so it's an anniversary in July of 2022. Making history as the first black woman to lead a regional Federal Reserve Bank. And she's probably saying, I'm surprised that I am the first. She thought there were others, but she is somebody who comes to the post after many years in academia. Most recently at the University of Michigan, she spent 16 years and served as a provost and executive vice president of academic affairs. She's also held faculty positions at Georgetown and Harvard. She holds an undergraduate degree from Harvard and a PhD in economics from MIT. As the CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, one of 12 regional banks in the Federal Reserve System, she oversees all of the bank's activities. Listen to this. This is what she has on her plate, including economic research and analysis, banking, supervision, and financial stability efforts, community economic development activities, and a wide range of payments, technology, and finance initiatives. Needless to say, we are extremely pleased that she could join us today to share some of the bank's priorities and reflect on her first year in office. Dr. Collins will deliver opening remarks, and then we'll move on to a sort of fireside chat. Dr. Collins, thank you for joining us this morning. The floor is yours. Well done. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Jim, for that wonderful introduction. It really is just an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you this morning. And, I have to say, given all of the very distinguished leaders who have stood at this podium before me, I'm in pretty special company. And given the history here, that is all much appreciated. I do want to thank Jim for inviting me. Yes, he was one of the earliest, and I appreciated that, and I've really been looking forward to being with all of you. It was nice to meet a number of you earlier this morning. I have great appreciation for the council and its members for a variety of reasons, and I just want to highlight all of the work that you do across your organizations individually and collaboratively to help keep New England's economy vibrant. As a macroeconomist and former dean of a school of public policy, I just have to say it's really wonderful to see you bring together business leaders, policymakers, organizations that really collaborate in the public interest. I also very much appreciate the nonpartisan nature of the New England Council and also just the breadth of various organizations, industries, parts of New England that you connect and that you work with. And I do have to say, since I'm coming back to this region, having lived here over 30 years ago, but with wonderful memories, it's a pretty extraordinary region, both because of the organizations here, but also because of, frankly, the brainpower, the energy, the dedication, the collaborative spirit, and also the character, I would say, that people bring to the table. So thank you for all of that. I also want to thank Jim for serving for many years on a quarterly Boston Fed Advisory Council that's made up of small and medium-sized businesses. Jim, we've appreciated your insights and your participation. Thank you. So today I'm going to start with a bit of context about our work at the Fed. And then I'll share some of my current views on the economy and monetary policy and end by commenting on some of the challenges as well as the opportunities that I see ahead. And the roles that the Boston Fed and so many others can play, and then I'll be happy to take some questions. But first, I have a standard disclosure. These perspectives are my own. I'm not speaking for any other Federal Reserve policymakers. So I like to say that our work at the Fed is all about supporting a vibrant, inclusive economy that works for everyone, not just for some people. And as you know, the strength of an economy has many dimensions. So the Fed is involved in a wide range of activities, and Jim talked about that already. All are in the public interest. But I should underline a really important distinction, which isn't always well understood, and that is that the Federal Reserve's activities are not in fiscal policy. We at the Fed are entrusted with monetary policy making, in particular setting short-term interest rates that ultimately affect the availability of money and credit for businesses and for households. In this, we're guided by our dual mandate from Congress, stable prices and maximum employment. So we spend a lot of time analyzing economic conditions, using data, doing research, and also, importantly, listening to stakeholders from across our region and also nationally. Our portfolio is a lot bigger than that. Our economy also needs reliable credit and payment systems. The Fed's entrusted with responsibilities regarding the safety, soundness, and stability of banking and financial systems. And we serve as a lender of last resort to financial institutions. We also provide back-end infrastructure to the banking system and the U.S. Treasury, ranging from currency and coin circulation to various ways to transfer funds electronically. And for many years, we've been involved in innovating to make payment systems more effective and more efficient. So I want to turn now to sharing some of my current views on the economy, the outlook, and monetary policy. Our focus at the Fed remains on bringing inflation down to our 2% target in a reasonable amount of time. Price stability is really essential for a well-functioning economy, and it's an important precondition for maximum employment that is sustainable over time. So reducing inflation relates to both parts of our dual mandate from Congress. And as I continue to hear, as I travel around New England, that there's a significant toll that high inflation has taken and takes on households, especially those with lower incomes struggling to make ends meet, and also on businesses, often as they grapple with higher costs and more complex planning and investment decisions. I like to give my bottom line up front when I speak, And in my view, this phase of our policy cycle requires patience and holistic data assessment as we stay the course. I expect that we will need to hold rates at restrictive levels for some time. And while we may be near or even at the peak for policy rates, further tightening could be warranted depending on incoming data. Patience will give us more time to better separate signal from noise as we assess available data and to balance risks as the effects of our tightening policy continue to work their way through the economy. So I'd like to briefly explain my rationale. And since I see holistic data assessment as particularly important in the current context, I've shared a handout. And it has some charts that show just a few of the many data series that I review as part of the wide range of information I use to assess the evolving economy. So I do know not everyone's a data geek like I am or a former professor, but I do hope that the charts will be helpful and interesting as I make my remarks. So in reviewing the economic data, I look for patterns and trends that show both sustained reductions in inflation and progress on the underlying goal of bringing demand and supply into better balance. And I want to start there because strong demand relative to supply has been a key factor driving the high inflation. While we're seeing some signs of moderation, demand continues to outpace supply, creating price pressures. So if you look at Figure 1, the black line shows how the level of real GDP, or the production of goods and services adjusted for inflation, has evolved relative to trend, which is shown in the dotted line. The trend is an estimate of sustainable output for the economy over time. A key takeaway is that GDP remains above trend, a sign of demand continuing to outstrip supply. And many forecasters expect continued above-trend growth this quarter. GDP growth has been supported importantly by resilient household consumption expenditures shown by the lighter blue line, and that's the largest component of aggregate demand. So what about inflation in this context of demand still outpacing supply? There are a lot of different inflation indicators to watch, of course, and so I want to focus on the Fed's preferred measure in Figure 2. Panel A shows that on a year-over-year basis, total inflation, which is the dark blue line, has come down significantly from its peak, but does remain somewhat elevated. However, core inflation, which is the lighter blue line, shows considerably less progress, though with some improvement in recent months. While the core measure excludes the important but volatile food and energy components, it tends to better predict future inflation. Monthly inflation readings tend to be much more volatile than year-over-year measures. And having Panel B of Figure 2, which shows monthly data for core inflation, right next to Panel A helps to illustrate that point. Panel B also shows that the variability of monthly core inflation has increased since the pandemic. And that's a point that I'll return to in a moment, and it's one key reason for patience in assessing the data at this phase in our policy cycle. In Figure 3, panels A, B, and C show the three main components of core inflation. And since those components behave quite differently, looking at them separately helps to better assess the price pressures and where they're coming from and how things are evolving. These charts include 3, 6, and 12-month annualized changes. Shorter horizons help to highlight the recent developments, which of course are important, but they're also typically more variable, as I've noted, or noisier. And so looking at multiple horizons is part of what we do. It can help paint a fuller picture of how inflation's evolving. And I really do think there's, a picture out there, and it's almost like a big jigsaw puzzle, and we're filling in a variety of different pieces to try to just understand how things are evolving, which is one of the reasons to pull together so many different types of data in a variety of different ways. So Panel A in that figure shows that most of the moderation in core inflation has come from a significant decline in core goods sector, where resolution of supply chain bottlenecks has helped better align demand and supply. Panel B shows that shelter or housing inflation, though still high, has slowed recently as well, and you might note that the 3-month change is below the 6-month change. As moderation in new market rents continues to pass through, this decline will likely continue. However, as shown in Panel C, core services price inflation, excluding shelter, which is over half of core inflation using the PCE measure, that large component has only modestly slowed so far. So there are some promising developments, but given that continuing strength in demand, my view is it's just too early to take the recent improvements as evidence that inflation is on a sustained path back to 2%. Again, that's leading me towards the need for patience and data dependence. So I want to turn briefly to the labor market. There, too, demand continues to outstrip supply overall. And a very familiar refrain, I'm sure most, if not all of you have heard it too, throughout New England for some time and nationally, has been about the challenges related to hiring overall. But we are seeing evidence of improved alignment, and of course the developments are different across sectors. Panel A of Figure 4 shows that overall payroll employment continues to grow above trend, but has been slowing. Not in the charts, but lower voluntary quits and lower, though still high, job vacancies are also consistent with a cooling but resilient labor market. On the labor supply, we've seen some recent increases in labor force participation, especially for prime age workers, who are those aged 25 to 54. That's shown in Panel B. It's encouraging that more people are entering the labor force, and that's the reason why the unemployment rate ticked up to 3.8% in August. But important to note that 3.8% is still very low by historical standards. I also reviewed disaggregated labor market data, recognizing that the aggregate numbers don't show the wide range of experiences across groups of people, sectors, and places. For example, Figure 5 shows that there are persistent disparities in unemployment for different racial and ethnic groups in Panel A, and for people with different educational levels in Panel B. And I'll have more to say about disparities in a moment. So overall, then, rebalancing demand and supply in the labor market has some way to go. In particular, Figure 6 shows wage inflation, measured here by the Employment Cost Index, or ECI, on a quarterly and yearly basis. Wage growth remains elevated in the current high inflation environment, and recognizing that workers benefit from increases in their real wages or purchasing power, I look forward to returning to an environment with wage growth that's consistent with the 2% inflation target. Continuing restrictive monetary policy should temper demand further and bring it into better balance with supply. However, importantly, I do not believe a significant slowdown is required. I've described myself for some time as a realistic optimist, realistic about the risks and uncertainties of a baseline outlook, but optimistic because the resilience that I see in our economy leads me to believe that price stability is achievable with an orderly slowdown and only a modest unemployment rate increase, ideally preserving some of the favorable labor supply developments and dynamics. So I'm going to shift now to just a brief assessment of the impact of monetary policy actions to date and my outlook. As Figure 7 shows, starting in March 2022, we raised the federal funds rate target by 5.25 percentage points in just 18 months. That's the fastest policy rate increase in 40 years. While the effects of higher interest rates were almost immediately evident in the housing sector, they've been much slower to show through to broader indicators of activity such as GDP and labor markets. Typically, monetary policy actions are estimated to meaningfully affect broader measures of economic activity with a lag of 4 to 6 quarters. But there's considerable variation around these estimates, and special factors in the pandemic recovery are likely making the lags longer than usual. In particular, compared to previous cycles, policy tightening has occurred amid sound business and household fundamentals, which is a good thing. This likely implies a longer time for tighter credit conditions to work through the economy. For example, many firms had refinanced when interest rates were very low, somewhat insulating their investment plans from higher rates. And households that accumulated excess savings during the pandemic have needed to borrow less than usual so far to finance expenditures. So monetary policy may take longer than normal to affect the broader economy, but given that policy is clearly in restrictive territory, I do expect to see slowing growth by the end of this year and throughout 2024. And there are signs already that are consistent with this outlook. Firms' cash levels are returning to pre-pandemic trends, and household excess savings are declining. Demand should slow as spending becomes more interest sensitive. Again, the goal is an orderly slowdown that better aligns demand with supply, which is essential to ensure that inflation is on a sustainable trajectory back to target. So I'm going to conclude my discussion of the economy just by highlighting some of the considerations underpinning that outlook. In particular, the economic circumstances surrounding the pandemic and recovery have been and continue to be quite unusual, and that has implications for monetary policy. I flagged two dimensions. First, we're in a period where it's difficult to extract signal from the noise in the data, and some data, such as monthly PCE inflation, are unusually volatile. And second, there's increased uncertainty about the timing and ultimate impact on the economy from policy tightening to date. Reasons include the unusually sound initial business and household fundamentals and the unusually rapid initial pace of tightening. The risk of inflation staying higher for longer must now be weighed against the risk that an overly restrictive stance of monetary policy could lead to a greater slowdown in activity than is needed to restore price stability. And this is the broader context that calls for a patient and careful but deliberate approach to policy, allowing time to assess the effects of policy actions to date and then acting appropriately. Importantly, patience does not mean indecision or a change in the commitment to the 2% target, but rather time to ensure the economy is on that clear trajectory to achieve price stability. Overall, we're well positioned to proceed cautiously in an uncertain economic environment, recognizing the risks while remaining resolute and data dependent with flexibility to adjust as conditions warrant. So I started with comments about the strengths of New England, and I want to close by alluding to some of the challenges I hear about also, and some of the things that organizations like yours and mine are doing about them. The privilege and the responsibility of policymaking makes engagement with stakeholders, I would say, essential. So I'll continue to prioritize taking cross-sector visits to each New England state and hearing from people in a wide range of roles who make up and shape our economy. And there's some pictures of some of my visits, which I've enjoyed tremendously in Figure 8. Again, our domain at the Fed is monetary, not fiscal policy, but our mandate and our concern is a vibrant, inclusive economy, and that brings our focus to challenges that have prevented people from participating in the economy or the workforce. Real economic issues like childcare, housing, climate, and infrastructure such as transportation and broadband. And like many of you, we worry about the gaps in wealth accumulation and prosperity by group and by place. These are very real challenges, but I remain optimistic about all that we together can accomplish when we care, collaborate, study, and act, and I want to give just a few examples. Many parts of New England that were once centers for manufacturing or natural resources have faced long-term challenges. Our Working Places initiative, started in 2014 under my predecessor, Eric Rosengren, is based on research showing that an essential element of place-based economic resurgence is local cross-sector collaboration. And now in 30 communities across 5 states, teams of local leaders choose a shared goal for improving the economy that benefits low-income people, and then they develop and implement strategies. The Fed hosts, convenes, and supports these efforts, not financially, and the real work, though, is done in the local ingenuity and commitment. Lack of affordable child care is a very real economic issue across New England and nationally. Child care gives options to parents who want or need to participate in the workforce. As an outgrowth of our Working Places effort, a team in Fitchburg has implemented a bilingual child care entrepreneur training program to help support individuals in opening up their own small child care businesses. It has 80 graduates, and it just started its 5th cohort. Climate change is on the minds of many business and government leaders. The Fed's responsibilities make it important and prudent for us to study the issues. For example, we have recent research examining potential costs related to climate change for Massachusetts cities and towns and ultimately for taxpayers. We find that per capita local spending could grow significantly in the decades ahead, with hotter and stormier weather increasing the cost of public works, government administration, school operation, and other public services. And last but not least, I mentioned earlier the Fed's work on payments. It wasn't long ago that paper checks had to be flown around the country to settle at the bank they were drawn on. It seems like a while ago. My kids have very little appreciation of the role that checks used to play. The Boston Fed and others helped pioneer digital check imaging and expanded automated clearing, and more recently, creation of an entirely new instant payments infrastructure to help banks of all sizes meet needs of customers. In July, we launched the FedNow Instant Payments Service, and the national program leader for that work is the Boston Fed's own COO, Ken Montgomery, who I know is well known to many in this room. So across New England, I hear that people from all sectors want to collaborate and work together to address challenges and solve problems like these. Efforts large and small in combination can make a real difference. We will continue at the Boston Fed working to serve the public interest and to support a vibrant, inclusive economy that is full of opportunity. It's a privilege and a responsibility, and we look forward to collaborating with many of you to help our region thrive. So thank you again for inviting me to join you today, and I'm happy to take some questions.
12 regional presidents, then there was also appointees by the President of the United States, governors. Can you just explain, the role of the governors, the Federal Reserve, who appoints you, how long the term is, as well as the governors?
Sure, and first of all, can people hear me? Okay. Excellent. Thank you for the question, because you're absolutely right. It's a complicated system, and I think most people really don't understand it very clearly. So there is a board of governors that's based in Washington, D.C., and there are 7 governors. They are nominated by the president, have to be confirmed by Congress. In addition, there is a what I'll call kind of federated system of 12 regional reserve banks. Boston, it should be called the New England Fed, not the Boston Fed, because we serve all of New England except county in Connecticut. Each of the reserve banks has a president. Their board of directors does a national search for the presidents, which have to be approved by the board, but not related to the president or to Congress. And each of us has a region. Again, the first district, which is Boston Fed's region, is almost all of New England. And I think that is really important in terms of connecting and engaging the Federal Reserve System more fully with people on the ground, really being able to connect all of the data, and I showed you some of it in those charts, with what people are experiencing in a variety of different sectors. And so that combination, the group in Washington, the governors, and the 12 reserve districts, which are all over the country, I think is a really important balance. And so that was the rationale behind creating that structure.
And how long is the term for governors?
So the governors have 12-year terms, but often someone is appointed to fill out an existing term. And so that gets a little complicated as well for an individual governor in terms of how long they have before they would have to be renominated.
Obviously, inflation is the big issue in the room here, and it's the big issue with an awful lot of residents, not only in New England, but all over the country. I'd like to think that much of your work lowering inflation is done. You've gone from 9.1% last year to what, 3.2? Needless to say, it's been the most aggressive series of interest rates in, I think, 4 decades. So what more needs to be done to bring that down to that 2% level?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that, to me, the price stability part of our congressional mandate, price stability really means a low, stable level of inflation where no one's thinking about inflation. And we have been in an environment where, frankly, everyone is thinking about inflation, and as opposed to the other activities, economic activities and other activities of their lives. And so that's part of the why it's so important to really reestablish price stability. And I don't think that we are there yet. One of the reasons I showed you a couple different measures is some components of inflation are just incredibly noisy. They move around a lot. The kind of core measure that has traditionally been the best forecast or better forecast of where inflation will be over the medium term, that one has shown a lot less progress than what you just suggested, and is one of the, so that core lighter blue line in the figure that I showed, that has come down a bit, and some of the components are starting to come down, but there's more to do there. And so from my perspective, that certainly means staying the course and continuing to make it very clear that we are resolute and our goal is bringing inflation down in a reasonable amount of time, and holistically assessing the data. And we have, because of how expeditiously we moved at the outset, I think we've positioned ourselves to be able to be quite patient and to really gather quite a bit of information as we make decisions about how high and how long. So as I said, I think we may be very near, and perhaps we're at where there's a peak, but I wouldn't rule out, depending on how the data evolves, the possibility that additional tightening will be needed. So that brings me back to patience, holistic data assessment, and that's how I think about it.
I could ask a basic question. Where did the 2% come from? Why not lower it to 3%?
So let me say a couple things about that. And I remember, so I'll try not to put my kind of too academic macro hat on. There's a long literature on how you target inflation and how to think about that. And the targeting, the approach to monetary policy that identifies an explicit public target is something that, if you went back 40 years, was not very common. There was starting to be a literature on it, but is now widespread across central banks around the world. And again, the goal is to try to identify a low, stable level that is consistent with price stability, and I told you how I think about that. There used to be a discussion about, well, should it be zero? But if it's zero for a variety of different reasons, that can create additional problems and reduce a bit of, or more than a bit in some cases, flexibility. And so 2% was selected not just by the Fed as a good balance there. And of course, there's a range of views. I'll also say that, the discussion many years ago was quite different from a discussion in the midst of restoring price stability, when the credibility of the Federal Reserve is really one of our most important tools and assets, and that's something that's earned.
As you go around New England, you talk to developers and holders of commercial mortgages. Now that you see so many buildings that are 20%, 30% occupied, some landlords are very concerned about making those payments. What are you hearing as you travel through New England?
So it's certainly true. First of all, I talk with all kinds of people, and it's incredibly important to complement the statistical data. There are a lot of nuances, a lot of things that I think you can get from those conversations. Often the data is telling you what did happen last month, last quarter. Conversations can tell you how people are thinking about things, what they're seeing now, and what they're expecting, what they're expecting to do in the future. So what I'm hearing, and the issue of vacancies and the issue of perhaps different engagements with place is something that comes up very frequently. It's something that we monitor. It's something that we talk about. What I'm hearing is something similar to, I think, what people are hearing across the country, that vacancy rates are down compared to pre-pandemic. They're actually not down as much in Boston as in some other large cities. At the same time, I think things are still unfolding, and so I think it's too early to tell exactly what the balance will be in terms of how different properties get used. And that's something that we are certainly talking to people about and monitoring carefully, not just in the Boston area. These are issues that arise in gateway cities, some of the smaller areas, that arise also in suburban areas and in rural areas. They're, the issues of place, which I think are becoming more salient in a variety of different contexts. This is one of them.
you come here from a role in academia, and your first visit to a college, I believe, was to the Community College of Rhode Island, and you gave the keynote convocation, graduation at the Bunker Hill Community College just recently. So obviously, community colleges play a role in your mind on growing the economy and helping people to retool and get additional new skills for new jobs and in the New England economy. Talk about what your role here at the Fed and community colleges play.
Sure, I'm happy to. And you know, almost all of my career has been in higher education. So I am deeply committed from a variety of contexts, you know, both the research part, but also preparing young people for the opportunities to thrive and to prosper. That's important for them individually, it's important for their families, it's important for communities, it's important for our economy. And community colleges are where over half of young people who go into higher education start that part of their journeys. And I think that for many parts of our society, they can be underappreciated. And so it seemed important to me in the context of what I see as the overarching mission for the Boston Fed, which is a vibrant and inclusive economy, to really lean a bit into the inclusive part and to look to institutions that are supporting opportunities for people of all ages, all backgrounds, in a way that is intentionally accessible and that also is really committed to collaboration with employers and businesses in a variety of different contexts. So that to me was very consistent with our message. And I'll say I'm committed to supporting higher education more broadly and look forward to additional conversations at other higher ed institutions as well.
How is New England doing compared to the broader U.S. economy?
Yeah, so in some ways New England is doing quite well. In other ways, New England has some special challenges. I would say, because I want to end with positives, I think that's always a good thing to do. You know, New England is aging faster than the overall country is. And that's one of the challenges that, you know, that I think is important to recognize. It's also an opportunity, right? We have an opportunity to help really develop and showcase ways to engage with an aging population, learn from countries around the world that are farther down in that demographic change than we are, to support a vibrant economy that really does work well. You know, that relates to New England has historically had lower unemployment rates than the national average. That was true before the pandemic. It's true more recently. At the same time, labor force participation in New England has not recovered to the extent that it has nationally. Some of that's because of aging. There may be some other reasons as well. So I would say it's a mixture. Again, the vibrancy and the number of sectors that really help to lead the country that are based in New England really adds a huge amount of opportunity to build on the successes, the ingenuity, the great expertise and teams here, you know, to address some of those challenges.
You know, you mentioned some of the challenges that New England faces: affordable housing and the lack of affordable childcare is probably the most expensive in the nation. We're going to be hosting a forum on affordable housing later this fall and bringing the parties together from different New England states. Is there a role for the Fed to play in either one of those issues?
There's absolutely a role, and it may not be direct in that way. So, I mean, as I've talked about, there's a wide range of things that we do to support that broader mission. You know, I heard a lot in conversations that I had as I traveled around New England just about the, many dimensions of the challenges of lack of affordable housing, lack of affordable quality childcare. Many of them really focused on the extent to which those are impediments for people to participate in our economy and in our workforce. And so that's, to me, very much connected with part of our dual mandate, which is for maximum employment. One of the ways that, of course, we're not going to go and build a number of child care centers. However, one of the things that we can do is to really study and understand better what the challenges are and what kinds of initiatives have been tried and what we learn from them, and as a nonpartisan, analytic resource to try to share out those lessons. The example that I gave is also an example of using our collaborative approach, working with community leaders if they, for example, in our Working Places initiative, identify childcare, and I'm using that as an example, there's housing issues as well, that they see as a major impediment that they would like to develop strategies to address in order to make their economies more vibrant. We can help to work with them to support that work. So I think there are a variety of ways that we can play a role, and one of them, frankly, is just by making it really clear that lack of affordable quality childcare is an economic issue, and so we should be thinking about it in that context.
So many of our business leaders early in the year, they were prepared for a recession, but listening to you and your remarks, it seems like we may be prepared for a moderate economic slowdown in the coming months. Am I correct?
Well, my baseline certainly has that feature. Let me say a couple things. One is that my baseline for some time has included some slowdown, and I showed that the kind of supply growth above trend and the strong demand, especially from consumers, is one of the things that has been creating price pressures and contributing to the inflation. And so some slowdown is really part of getting to a sustained price stability environment. But there's so much resilience in our economy. There are a lot of unusual dimensions to both the pandemic recession, which was really sudden, really deep, had a different kind of sectoral component. I mean, there are a lot of unusual aspects to it. As we've come out of it, again, one of the unusual aspects compared to other times when the Federal Reserve has tightened to address inflation is that both businesses and households, as we started into this, had very sound fundamentals. And there are also a lot, and so that provides some, I call it resilience, to be able to slow in an orderly way without needing that big downturn. I say realistic optimist, recognizing the risks. One of the risks for me has been the risk of a self-fulfilling kind of negative sentiment in which people lose confidence and could actually cause a more significant downturn, which is one of the reasons that I've been talking about that outlook. I think the pathway for that often called soft landing, softish landing, has gotten wider. I'm not as worried about the, that kind of self-fulfilling concern as I was, but it's still there. And so, yes, I do continue to be a realistic optimist. I don't think we need a significant downturn in order to bring inflation back down to 2%. And, I recognize that there are risks around that outlook.
Was there anything that surprised you in your first year on the job? First of all, I have to say, I came into this job, and I said it a couple times in my remarks, I came into this job really seeing it as a privilege, a responsibility, and an opportunity. I knew that there were a number of things in the portfolio, but even I wasn't as aware of just the breadth of ways that the Federal Reserve works to engage and to try to support the vibrant economy. I'd also say, if you asked me back in February 2022 how the economy was going to evolve and what was going to happen related to energy and the war, I mean, so many things were unpredictable that we have had to try to understand, to work together. I'm always someone who says, a little bit of humility is a good thing, and we need to work together, learn from each other to make decisions. So there's certainly been surprises in terms of things that have happened that impact the economy.
You know, if I put my academic hat on, there's going to be a lot to study for a long time. And I just have to say that and I don't know if this is a surprise, but just have so appreciated the incredible welcome and collaborative spirit and learning about all of the work that so many are doing across New England to really help people and to help our communities and our economy thrive.
We have time for a couple of questions, so I thought I'd take advantage of it. Just identify yourself also. John.
Dr. Collins, my name is Ian Fitch. I know your charter is monetary and not fiscal, but you being a macroeconomist and you're speaking strictly from your personal perspective, I don't think anyone in this room is unaware of this huge elephant that's sitting in the middle of our economy, which is the $31 or $32 trillion debt that we're carrying, which is growing every day by leaps and bounds. At some point, that bubble's got to pop, and leading to frankly disastrous consequences. How are we going to get hold back this runaway freight train and finally get it under control?
So I appreciate you raising the debt, which is large and is a extremely important issue. You know, I will say that in my current role that, you know, commenting on what the way forward might be is you know, not something for me to do. That really is a matter for Congress, the administration. I will say that we certainly recognize the importance and the role and ways that fiscal policy in its many dimensions interact with what we do at the Federal Reserve. It's part of, you know, what we consider as we are making policy decisions, as we're developing our outlooks, and that will continue to be true. And I, again, agree that these are really important issues for our country and our economy.
Did you have your hand up? The gentleman behind you?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Suka here. Question for you. We currently have a inverted yield curve, as you know, and do you have any perspectives or insights on what might happen to the longer part of the yield curve, like the 10 and its 1 year?
Yeah, so I mean, there's been some, I would say, kind of unusual behavior of the yield curve over time, and often historically, yield curves of the type that we've seen have predicted economic outcomes that we haven't seen, at least not in this cycle. So I think that there are a lot of, in addition to some of the usual factors, there's some unusual things that you know, make it difficult to fully interpret why the yield curve has been inverted and what's likely to happen going forward. I would say that some of the recent increases in longer term rates, in my view, reflect, at least in part, a kind of what seems to be a more shared market understanding of the kind of resolute approach and the likelihood that rates will remain elevated for perhaps somewhat longer than I think some had interpreted over some earlier time period. So I do think that that credibility and you know, that I'll say communication is one of the things that explains why there have been some of the changes recently, but hard to get too far ahead and try to crystal ball exactly what's gonna evolve going forward.
Peter Rice.
President Collins, quick question. Are you concerned at all, and we're all very concerned about access to credit, particularly for minority groups. With this monetary tightening, we know that this will have a disparate effect on those groups as they try and access credit. How do you work with partners to make them aware of this opportunity?
Yeah, so again, a couple things to say about that. I am quite concerned and very aware of the fact that different groups and also different places, and often those are correlated, have very different experiences in our economy, and that includes access to credit, that includes experiences in the labor market, that includes a number of different factors. One of the things I think it's important for us to do is to be not only aware, but to be monitoring different trends, trying to identify how things are evolving, if they're, sharing that information out, but also analyzing it and trying to work with partners that are actively engaged in supporting some of those particular groups. I also think that talking about disparities is important, and that's why I do it or one of the many reasons that I do it. So it's both collaborating with partners, studying and making sure we have data, and finding ways to try to address things. The last thing I'll say on that topic is that high inflation has also had disparate effects. And so recognizing the impact on a number of communities of color and on households with lower incomes and sometimes that have been more marginalized, that's part of the why also for bringing inflation down in a reasonable amount of time.
Other questions for the President? Again, I'm cognizant of her time. Yes, sir?
Hi, Sean Gotti. I'm at Pfizer. You're a very data-driven individual, Dr. Collins. A very offbeat question. Are there any data sources you use that are unusual or offbeat that help you in formulating your decisions?
That's a great question, especially for a data geek, right? I mean, what's not to like? So one of the things that I was really, I'll say excited by is to see the new data that people in the Boston Fed, across the Federal Reserve System, in other places as well, really explored to try to understand what was happening in the pandemic that was so unusual. I mean, things like using different types of information from cell phones to understand where people were going and how long they were spending, and trying to understand real shifts in patterns that impact the economy, but also impacted a whole number of other aspects as well. So I think collaboration to learn about new data sources is something that we're kind of interested and intrigued by, and that's one example that I would mention that maybe folks had thought about a bit before, but became actually quite central. And so there's been quite a lot of creativity to try to find new ways to understand some of the shifts that we've seen, and that's going to continue, which again I think is exciting.
If I could just ask the last question. You have a very unique background. You are of Jamaican descent. You were born in Scotland. You were raised in New York City. And you often spoke about visiting Jamaica as a child and how those experiences have shaped your career. And can you just tell us a little more about your background, how it affects the way you approach your work today?
Yeah, so I have had a bit of an unusual background. I mean, I used to say that if you grew up in Manhattan and spent many of your summers, most of your summers growing up visiting Jamaica, including Kingston, Jamaica, you had lots of questions about, why living standards were so different. And also, I always remember an experience where my family was traveling, and some of my parents' friends were unhappy that they had to change currency because it would be so much simpler if everyone just used the US dollar and they didn't have to do that. And then I ended up on Jamaica, and there were these 10-year-olds doing exchange rate arbitrage in their head. And so one of the lessons to me was really that there's smart people everywhere. And in order to really recognize that and foster a vibrant, inclusive economy, we need to find ways that support and recognize that we'll all benefit from it. And and so that kind of mindset that says that let's assume that there are potential and opportunity, and find ways collectively to provide those opportunities out as broadly as we can. I think some of that came from just the very different experiences. These kids did not have a lot of the advantages that I had, and they were entrepreneurial and smart, and also a lot of fun. We used to play with them on the beach and eat guineps. I don't know, all kinds of wonderful Jamaican fruit. But anyway, so that was one of the things. And it also, I started my career my dissertation was actually on exchange rate regimes and exchange rate challenges, and some of that was motivated by challenges that I had seen the Central Bank of Jamaica grapple with and have to devalue the Jamaican dollar. And that's actually how I got into looking at central banks, was through exchange rates, which are really very much the purview of central banks. And our country, the U.S., has a flexible exchange rate, so the central bank is not actively managing it. But in countries with fixed or managed exchange rates, it's the central bank that does that. So very much kind of channeled my research career and some of my policy interests as well.
Well, we want to thank Dr. Collins for finding time to be here today. I think we'd all agree it was a very informative discussion, and we look forward to listening and learning more about New England's economy from you. And as somebody who has served on the advisory board for 21 years, believe me when I say that she is out everywhere getting input, listening to all sectors of the economy to get a better understanding of where we are and where we should be going in the future. So congratulations on your appointment and continued success.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.